All right, everyone, welcome back to a Rural Music Teacher podcast. This is episode 7, beginning year checklist. I'm your co-host, André Wilkins, and joining us from Mississippi, we finally have our other co-host.
Hello, Katie Oglesby. Good to see you guys. Welcome. I'm happy to be back.
It's nice to have you back. Our mission statement for this podcast is this podcast where we educate, elevate, and encourage rural music teachers of all levels in the pursuit of a fulfilling career in music education. Katie, what are our values?
We value positivity, solution-based discourse, learning from each other's experiences and strengths. This is a safe place to be vulnerable with our struggles and figure out solutions together to help out our careers. This is not a place to throw others under the bus, judge others, or to let our egos get in the way of making us better educators. So, André, let's get into it.
Absolutely, Katie. We wanted to put together a checklist kind of midsummer right now. We go back to school August 7th with professional development. And I don't know about at your school, but we don't always get the most classroom time at our professional development. And I noticed when my wife and I had our first child and only child that trying to find a babysitter at the beginning of August to try and get caught up on everything was really tough. So trying to figure out a way to get organized before we go into the professional development so we could use our time wisely, I found was super important. And I know, Katie, you really get after it and plan out the year a couple days ahead of time. So let's talk through our process.
Yeah, certainly. I agree. Yeah, I agree. We don't always get a lot of time in our classrooms to prepare before the school year actually begins. And as much as I encourage everybody to not spend all summer working, like go live your life, go enjoy the sunshine. It really does make a huge difference if even if just a few hours, we get in there and do a few things to organize and set us up for success for the rest of the year. So just want to start by saying this is what works for us in our programs. What works for you might be different, but this is what we found success in throughout our years here in Salida. So let's get started with, André, what do you do first to set up your beginning of the year?
Well, when I pack up the end of the year, being that we're at the high school where the auditorium is, I have to make sure the space is usable over the summer for our other partners in the community that come and do performances. We had an active shooter drill that the local police department put on the other day. We have a wonderful organization down Salida Aspen Concert Series that comes and puts on these really, really top-notch professional concerts. So I have to transform my space from a learning space for students to a professional space for professional musicians. And unpacking that basically means that I have to go through and take everything out of storage first and re-inventory what I put away. Because oftentimes, and this isn't meant to be a negative statement for anybody other than myself, is I forget what I put away, even though I write it down and say, okay, this is where I put it. And who knows if stuff walks away with people that end up getting a master key when they rent the space. And so I have to keep pretty diligent notes on what's there and what's not. And I would say that after I figure out all the stuff that I need to get out, I look at my beginning of the year plan, and that's what am I trying to accomplish the first week of school? Is that just getting kids used to the expectations of the classroom? Is it handing out instruments and playing? Is it getting ready for marching band? Or is it getting ready for all-state choir auditions? They're pretty early in the year. So the first thing I do is inventory what I have to make the classroom successful.
Totally. And really thinking back to the end of the year, at that point we're so tired and done, and we're, we have a billion other things, high school directors, you guys have graduation, you don't stop until the very end. So at some point you're just trying to shove things into a storage space until the next year when you can figure it out, right? So it's just a very natural process that we go through where by the beginning of the year we have to look through our things. And André, I like how you said you look through what do you want to achieve in the first week, and so much of that first week is organizational, right? On the middle school level, and I'm sure the high school level too, I'm thinking about assigning lockers, getting kids used to a
Hmm.
routine where they know where they're sitting, handing out instruments or making sure kids know where they can get their instruments from if they're renting from somewhere else. Stuff like that is like that takes up, oh, setting up our binders, handing out music.
Yeah.
That takes pretty much the whole first week. Like, you're lucky to get through warm ups, right? In the
Hmm.
first week. And I think that's okay.
Absolutely. And yeah, especially at the middle school where you'll get students that you haven't had before. I'm pretty fortunate in
Mhm.
knowing the students other than the ninth graders, and I know what to expect from them. So there's a kind of a built-in student leadership with just, hey, where's your instrument? What condition is it in? What are your goals this year for choir? And how have you been using your voice over the summer? So making sure that you're prepared for that unknown of students is super important. I mean, how many kids spend the
Yeah.
first 2 weeks of school waiting for an instrument to get back from the repair shop? Or, yeah, you didn't photocopy enough copies of
Yeah.
your choral warm up, so they're looking over somebody's shoulder, and that just keeps getting pushed down the line. And I like that you bring
So
up,
getting to do some of those
oh,
are like
yeah.
getting to do some of those early are super nice, are very helpful before the school year begins. What were you going
Um,
to say, Andre?
oh, I was going to say, I always get in with our guidance counselors and dean of students and try and get student rosters and send out email communication based on the class that I'll be teaching, exactly what the student needs to have on the first day of school. And that tells me
Hmm.
two things. One, does the student and parents read their email? And two, if I am lucky enough to have them respond, I know what resources to have available on the first day of school for them.
Yes, actually, before the school year ends, I have a Google form for any instrument rentals that kids rent from the school. And I'll send out that Google form before the end of the school year to anybody who I know,
Nice.
like incoming fifth grade class, kids who I know will be renting an instrument from me again, who are, going into sixth,
Hmm.
seventh, eighth grade. Um, just so that when I open my school laptop again at the beginning of August, at the end of July, I can start going through my inventory that I stored away and get those instruments together, see if they're cleaned, ready to go. Um, get them back from the repair shop. What would it be, right? But getting that communication out even before the school year ends, I know that takes some. Uh, it's already crazy at the end of the year, but like it takes some forethought. But that has been helpful. I started last year, and it was kind of a game changer. So, Andre, I want to ask you, what organizational systems do you use in your classroom and do you set up at the beginning of the year so that you're more organized and successful going into the year with music, with grades or papers or whatever? What do you use to organize your mess?
It's kind of a I have several stages of this, and it's a great question because at different stages of the process in which I'm preparing for the school year, it's going to look differently. So what I first off doing is I have a nice set of whiteboards in my classroom, and I section off. They slide back and forth, and it's pretty cool. Each whiteboard is for a specific class and ensemble. So I'll go through and say class rosters, check. Are all do all guitars have strings? Check. And I'll go through each one of my classes and say, do I have the syllabus updated? Do I have my first week planned? And it's really just a checklist of everything so the first day of school is successful. And I would say the syllabus, I have to go, the first thing I do is syllabuses, and we do like a music department handbook at the high school. I go through and update all the dates to the correct years. And, there's been a couple times that it's like, oh man, December 7th hasn't happened on a Wednesday in 3 years. What year is this from? And I update I update my handbooks based on new school policy, and that was like a big thing during the COVID pandemic. Is the expectations of how to behave in the classroom, and I've kind of carried that through as we've come out with just like, hey, make sure you have hand sanitizer in your case, and make sure that you wash your mouthpiece at the end of each rehearsal, or make sure that when you show up with a water bottle for choir, it's not something that you know, have you ever seen those water bottles that when you spill, they just go everywhere versus like when you knock it over, it stays nice and contained?
Yeah.
That's always the thing is like, yeah, those sweet Stanleys are awesome, but also when you knock them over, there's water
When
everywhere.
they fall, it makes a puddle.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There needs to
Um,
be a Stanley gel for middle school and high school because it gets wet.
yeah, totally. And make sure that the piano in the classroom's tuned if you're using an acoustic piano. And then I just go through and just evaluate who is storing what in the classroom. The bands have a locker room. The choir has a whole folder slot area. I have a storage area that I keep percussion in, and I have a small set of lockers in there, and that's where we let the seniors stay so they could keep their distance and not rub off on the younger kids and give them bad habits. And then I just get into developing what repertoire I'm going to hand out the first week or what musical goals we're going to have the first week. And then I plan out concert series. And then I plan out getting supplemental materials, honor ensemble auditions, community performance groups. There's a great community jazz band in BV up the road that some kids want to participate in. There's community choir in town that requires some audition material. So just making sure I have all those extra opportunities laid out too. And then once it goes from
Yeah,
the
it's a lot of
whiteboard,
information.
yeah, once it goes from the whiteboard, then it goes onto my laptop into a Google Doc, and then I could use my whiteboard space back for instruction. And then I end up doing a year-long calendar that I print off the calendar sheets, and I have that up in this. It's all the same calendar, and I have it in 3 different places: in the classroom, in the storage room, and then in each practice room. So everybody sees the calendar, and I could be like, "No, you solo and ensembles on Thursday. It's been up there for 6 months. Like this isn't new." And it's pretty fun to watch kids choose what they remember and what they don't remember. Well, not always fun.
I
Sometimes it's
love
quite
that
frustrating.
idea.
Yeah, yeah. That's I try and set up my students so they have the least amount of excuses to not know what's going on.
Yeah. As long as you keep it up there, right? If it's in writing and you've reminded them many, many times, that's all you can do, right? And hopefully it
Absolutely.
gets through to them after many, many repetitions.
How about you? Tell us about your start of the year.
Yeah, so we all know that once the school year begins, it gets crazy, and when you have middle schoolers, it gets double crazy, right? There's a lot going on. So I try to at least make my space functional for me and my students. Something I've started was I took a file cabinet that was donated to me by a really awesome family in town, and all my students have decorated it throughout the last couple years. They put like stickers, capybara stickers. It's really cute. We call it the capybara cabinet. But I have fully organized my filing cabinet to where like each each row of it is for different things. So like my top row is things that I use throughout the year, like staff paper that I give to kids, music theory worksheets that I give to them, our music handbook. I also have a music handbook that I just give to all my classes because that's easier than writing a syllabus for each. Grading is pretty much similar for all of them. So like André said, I'll go through like computer wise, I'll go my syllabus, all of those things, make sure it's updated. Um, but I find that the physical things are the ones that I can get done in the summertime that really set me up for success once the kids get in, right? So going back to the cabinet, that top one is just, I have files for each of those things that I use for every class. Then my second one is for all my choirs, my 2 choirs that I have. So once I pick out rep, I'll put the music and copies in there. And then the third row is for all my bands. I might have to go into the 4th row this year for both bands. And I just kind of, label a file, put the music in there. And that way I make a bunch of copies of all the music. So when a kid, percussionist, what? Just kidding, loses their music, I can go to the capybara cabinet, get your copy, right? It's right there. They know what to get. So that's been very helpful. And I try to do that before the school year starts because then that's all done, organized. That's kind of a system that's put into place. I like to get all my chairs set up. I number my chairs
Hmm.
so that I can do seating charts. And this year, I'm very excited about it. I bought little sticky. What's the thing that connects your shoes when you don't know how to tie your shoes? It starts
Velcro.
with an S. Velcro.
Velcro.
No, it does not start with an S. It starts with V. Velcro. Thank you. I'm on summer brain.
Phonetic alphabet. It
Um,
sounds like F.
yeah, whatever. I have Velcro dots this year. I'm very excited about that. I'm going to put it on the ground underneath their chairs so that when they have to reset their room or whatever, the dots are there. They won't move. Right. We can reset. So I'm going to be putting those down. And then I also like to organize my like reeds and mouthpieces and any sort of accessories that go with our instruments. I have a separate cabinet for that that is right next to the capybara cabinet that kids can go into and get, cork reeds or reeds or whatever. Um, so I like to go through, clean, inventory, do those things with that right before the school year begins. Which brings me to my next thing. What stuff do we need to buy in the summertime so that we're ready to go, Andre?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, I think looking at your bands first, and then moving to choir, and then moving to other classes that you may be teaching. For me, band. If you know who you're ordering from, whether it's Amazon or a music store nearby, or a music store that's not nearby, you have to account for shipping, and you have to account for when your district could make these payments. I know our school, when I started 12 years ago, it was they're not sending out any checks till after September 1st. Like, you have your budget, you get things taken care of. After September 1st, all the checks go out. And so finding a music store that was lenient with when they get payment and when they get me equipment. And then after a couple years, I was like, hey, I need to do this sooner. I try and inventory reeds, valve oil, all those accessories before we leave school so that order is ready to go. And we supply all our students with reeds and valve oil. And I'm lucky enough to have some community members that make some donations so students don't have to worry about that. So I'll go through and I'll get 2 boxes of clarinet 2.5 reeds, 2 boxes of clarinet 3, same with saxophone, and then start working on high quality valve oil, slide grease, sorry, and making sure that whatever the kids get from the school, it's of quality. It doesn't have to be the best, but it's also not the pack of 1,000 strength 1.5 alto sax reeds of unnamed brand. And so making sure the kids all have access to accessories that are going to set them up for success. I really wish this would be something that you could just buy ligature screws in bulk. I don't know why this
Yes.
hasn't been a thing, but and viewers and listeners, if you know where I could buy just like 100 of the tiny ligature screws for soprano clarinets,
Hook
and then
us
a bunch of
up.
big ligature screws for bari sax and bass clarinet, I would be forever grateful because all my students have like one ligature screw, and
Hmm.
sometimes that doubles as a lyre screw for marching band. And
It's the true struggle that always disappears.
I mean, I'll take any instrument as long as I can find ligature screws with that donation. I don't care if that clarinet is unusable. I will use it for ligature screws. How about you? What are you thinking accessories for? Let's stick with band and then we'll switch to choir.
Yeah. At middle school level, I'm with you on you don't have to get the best quality, but you still should have some sort of standard for quality because that will just set your kids up for success. If you have low quality, then they're not going to be successful on their instrument as they learn, and that's the same for beginning band. Um, And however, I do recognize when you're in beginning band, sometimes those reeds go a little bit faster. They're trying to learn how to take care of their equipment, all of those things. I'll buy there. You can get boxes of like 50 reeds
Hmm.
from Rico, and so I'll buy those for the beginners. Usually I try to start them on a 2, and then I keep a little box of like 1.5s if they're really not getting on a strength 2. And then um, and then for my level 2 band, like my more advanced bands, I keep a couple boxes of like a slightly better brand, like a Van Doren for my reed players. Those are the biggest things, but my biggest stock of reeds would be like a Rico type brand, which I wouldn't say is the worst. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either. I think it's a good starter brand to start on. So that's really the biggest thing I purchase before the school year begins. And also gaffer tape. I use a lot of gaffer tape, which we
Yeah.
can talk about later for organizational things.
My band director in college would always say, when he was teaching us to be band directors, he'd say, whatever you give students, you have to have the confidence that if they give it to their parents and their parents buy them the same thing, don't be mad that they got them that. And I didn't, I was like, yeah, no duh. And then I started teaching and I would give out like the orange box of Rico Strength 2 for high school, sax players. And then they would buy a whole bunch of them. And I'm like, no, you're going to like step up. And I was like, oh, now I get what he was trying to say. Or like the cheap valve oil
Mm-hmm.
that just like grinds up the valves on a trumpet. And just buying the higher end stuff. I think it's like the blue. Yeah, this is where the woodwind player comes out. The Heckmans or whatever it's called. The fancy stuff my brass friends tell me to buy. That's what you should get.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I like the gaffer tape. That is something I didn't think of.
Yeah, I like live by gaffer tape. I used to. It's my little Velcro dots are taking place of gaffer tape as far as like where chairs go this year, which is nice. I won't have to be taping the ground, but I use it on my lockers. So that's another thing I do before the school year begins. Is I try to get colorful ones just to brighten up the room, and then I'll put a line of tape on the lockers. We have kind of wood backs on our lockers there. And then as I get my rosters, I'll just write kids' names on the lockers. And then, if we have an instrument change or a kid leaves partway through the year, all I have to do to check out that locker is take off the tape and then put a new one on there to know that that locker is empty, ready to go for the next person. So that's been a successful kind of organizational strategy for me. And I use a lot of it because of that, but it's really helpful.
That's nice. I'd also like to add that depending on the music store, and there are a ton in Colorado that, I mean, make the phone call to a store that you think is reputable and you trust and ask how they could support you. And you'll start that relationship with your music store where you could count on them. Like the biggest struggle for me as a rural music teacher is it's the day of the concert and we need a new bassoon reed and there's no store to go buy a bassoon reed. And so just making sure that you're staying on top of your inventory. Like I set calendars in my phone, like check my reed inventory, check my valve oil inventory. And that's like a job I assign to section leaders too. And I'll go to Harbor Freight and just buy like the plastic screw organizational stuff. And then I'll just have that in my room. And that's how I sort out my reeds and accessories and things. But also, I need to get folders, like those cardboard folders from music stores that they use for advertising. I get as many of those as they will give me because I put so much stuff in those folders and it's such an easy way to organize my room. I'll put like all flute warm-ups in there, all clarinet. And so that's how I stay organized. Nothing's worse than a kid that doesn't have access to being able to store their music appropriately. That's how you get the crumpled up returns. You have a really nice system with your binders that I would like to hear about. But since I don't pay for Zoom because I'm on a teacher salary, we are down to 2 minutes. and then we're going to have to restart our meeting. So we're going to take a break now, and then we'll come back and we'll hear about Katie's awesome binder system. So,
Woohoo!
commercial break brought to you by coffee.
Yay.
All right, we're back after saving money and not spending on a Zoom membership. Katie, tell us about your binders and how you organize your middle school class so you have all your stuff not a hot mess.
I get really jazzed to talk about binders, which is kind of wild. Hello, Kaya, guest of the podcast, second time guest. She loves music education.
Number one subscriber.
Absolutely. But I feel like there's two different binders we need to talk about. A, there's the binder that organizes your life, your score binder, and how we organize that and maybe set it up before the school year begins. And B, the students binders. So I want to start by talking about students binders. I really like using binders at the middle school level. I think it helps them stay organized. I try to check it throughout the year. And then we don't get the crumpled music or the lost music. I mean, we still do. Some kids, even just from getting their music to putting it in their binder, it gets lost, right? I don't know. It's magical. But it happens. But I find that there's a lot less chance of it getting lost with those binders. So I usually have them have about 3 sections of their binders. I just say, hey, come to school in their school supplies list, bring a binder and page protectors and some dividers, like 3 dividers. So one section, and then I provide the rest. One section is warm-ups, and I print out the warm-ups packet for my younger bands. We'll do Mike Perez's Essential Foundations, which is awesome, has scales and long tones and thirds and all the different things. We go through that. There's warm-ups for beginning band, all of those things. So I print that out. I give those to the kids at the beginning of 5th grade, and they should have them all the way through middle school, but I keep extras in my cabinet to give to them when they lose them. But so that's one thing I print out for them. And then the second is notes. The way I teach music theory is usually like on the board and they'll copy it down. So I'll do something in choir and in band called daily music theory. So I just have the day of the week and they write down the date. So I just have a paper that says date, they write it down, and then underneath it is blank staff lines, like 2 staff lines, and then they'll copy down what I do and write notes. Sometimes I do like a vocabulary chart or something that's like 3 columns. The first column is see, the other like what I see, and then the middle column is what it's called, and then the third column is what it does, what it means. So I put those. So I'll print out a whole bunch of those papers and give those to the kids in their notes section of the binder. And then in the third part, that's where they put the plastic page protectors and they put their music in. There has been some debate, and I've tried it both ways on if we should be using plastic page protectors, because it kind of does keep kids from taking out their music and writing on it, which isn't that hard. But sometimes kids won't write on their music as much. So I've also tried giving them copies that are already freehold punched, and that has worked as well. So I go back and forth on if I give them freehold punch music or not. But it's still nice for them to have plastic page protectors for, if I give them originals or whatever, or things that they should keep at the beginning of the year. So that's kind of the kids' binders. And I try and just have like a generic package that I give them at the beginning of the year, right? So I can print all of those things down. I can print out their warm-ups. I can print out their music theory notes for at least the first 8 weeks, the first quarter, right? And I can give them another packet then or whatever. And then hopefully by the beginning of the year, sometimes it doesn't always happen, I can give them their music for the first quarter too. So that's things that I can have planned and printed out and organized to just give them in a packet one day in class, so that they then just put it in their binders and then put in the dividers. That's been kind of helpful. And I learned that from my awesome mentor in student teaching from Charlotte Harsha. She kind of got me on the binder train, and she's pretty cool. And then as far as a teacher's binder goes, I need to either get a bigger binder because I always lose space in my teacher binder, and I just kind of have, or use my iPad. But if I use a binder this year, I need a very big binder and with lots of dividers. So I'll just have a divider for each class I teach, and I label that divider and then put any scores that I have in there. And then I'll put them in the folders if it doesn't fit in like normal pages. I'll just put it in the little folders of the dividers. This year, I've been thinking about using my school iPad. I feel very privileged and lucky that the school gave us iPads to work with teachers. I've been thinking about just scanning my scores in music this year, and so that I only have to keep up with my iPad and not a whole bunch of different papers. Um, there's pros and cons to both of those. So, but I think I might try, at least in first quarter, using just my iPad and seeing if I like it, scanning the scores, organizing it in files, seeing how that works out instead of carrying around a binder of music. I'll let you know. Andre, do you do anything differently as far as binders, both for yourself and your kids?
In the band setting, it's very traditional. You get your folder, you have your music. I expect you have your method book, and I expect you to be able to keep yourself organized. I have done binders with pep band and marching band music where we'll just set up binders with those plastic inserts just so, when we're outside or we're in the gym and we don't lose music. And I can say, here's the Alto 1 folder, take it. And that was pretty helpful when we would switch over to pep band season in basketball. As far as